1. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, as well as all of their business. It was historic and beautiful. Nothing bad ever seemed to happen except for the rare death or murder. There were two that stand out in my memory, but that's for another post. My family lived on a main road running through town across the street from our local K-8 school, in a farmhouse with no farm and 4 acres. I loved it. However, this day is one that I've never been able to shake from my memory. The area that I lived in is known for its very long, very snowy winters. Forecasts predicted a heavy snowstorm to roll through in the late afternoon and evening time. Due to the time of the forecast, most schools in our area decided to close the day of and the day after. My mom, who hated the snow, demanded that my father call out to work to help with myself, my younger brother, and my older sister, but more so to help with the snow. We already had a good foot and a half on the ground outside from previous storms, so my dad was happy to oblige to keep it from building up. Before the storm began, I made a quick trip to a popular chain bookstore with my mom. I can't remember why or what she needed there, but I do remember leaving the store with a new stuffed llama to add to my growing collection of stuffed animals. I was thrilled. Anyway, we went home with my book and my mom's animal and were ready to call it a day. Shortly after our return, the first flakes began slowly rolling out of the sky. My brother, who was only a year younger than me, began begging my parents to bundle him up so we could go out and play in the storm. They agreed, but I had to go out with him and we had to stay in the driveway where they could see us. I got all dressed in my snow gear and even found a doll sweater to put on my new llama. My brother took an extra 20 minutes to get dressed because my mom had to help him. Picture the brother in A Christmas Story, and that was him. Once bundled, we stomped outside in our boots and stiff jackets and began throwing ourselves in the snow. Time flew by. We had built a snowman, a fort, had a snowball fight, and before long I was too cold and wanted to go in. My brother did not. While I was trying to coax him inside with the promise of hot cocoa and a movie, a small maroon sedan pulled into our driveway. Weird, I thought. Who would be out driving in this? Then it occurred to me that it looked just like my Aunt Penny's car. I quickly ran inside to tell my parents that she was at the house, leaving my brother outside by himself. "Aunt Penny's here," I shouted. My dad quickly stormed past me to the window and my mom followed. I wondered why they looked so concerned for a visit from a family member, so I ran back outside to the car to greet her. When I got outside, I noticed the car had pulled forward into our driveway, and next to where my mostly immobile due to his snow gear brother was standing. I waddled up next to him and smiled, ready to greet our aunt, who lived almost an hour away. Instead, I was greeted by an older, thin man with dark circles around his eyes and wispy gray hair. He kept his empty eyes on my brother. They looked hungry, like he was feasting on the kid with his eyes. My stomach sank, and I went straight into stranger danger mode, pulling my brother back a foot with me. "Hey kids, your parents home? Or are you alone?" he asked. I stepped back another foot and shyly answered that they were home. They were inside. My mom always told me to answer with this whether she was home or not, in hopes of scaring away anyone with bad intentions. The man's entire demeanor changed. The hunger in his eyes vanished. He looked panicked and frustrated, then quickly began trying to back out of our weirdly shaped drive. But his tires were sliding on the fresh snow. Before I knew it, my dad was there. "Can I help you?" he asked. Then the man looked at him and started searching in his car. I stepped closer, and inside, all I could see were lumpy trash bags and filth in the back seat. "Yeah, I'm looking for a Smith Road?" the man answered. My dad pulled my brother and I close to him. "You know what town you're in? There's no road by that name," he said. The man fumbled over a few more words, uttering a sorry, and quickly left our driveway. My dad took down his plate number and called our local PD to let them know what happened. They said to just spend the day inside and thanked him for letting them know. I never played with that stuffed llama again. It went into my old storage bin and never came out until we moved years later, only to be sold at our yard sale. I always had a bad feeling about that day and what could have happened if my dad didn't come outside, and I wanted to get rid of anything that reminded me of it. The fact that it shook my parents made me uneasy as well, as they didn't scare easily. I don't know who the man was or why he wanted to know if our parents were home, but my gut feeling at the time and today, over 10 years later, was that he was looking for something more than the non-existent Smith Road. To the man with the hungry eyes staring at my brother in Aunt Penny's car. Let's not meet again. 2. So I've worked at Starbucks for 3 years next month. And for 1.5 of those years, this older guy has been coming in, often enough for us to remember his name and order without him being an everyday regular. We'll call him Greg for safety and privacy's sake. For detail reasons, I'll give you a brief description of me. I'm a 21-year-old female, 5'8", with naturally red hair and green eyes, and next to translucent pale skin. I'm also the only redhead employed at my store. So Greg is an older gentleman. He has white hair and walks with a cane and a limp. He's married, but always walks to our store alone with his dog and sits outside on the patio with a Trenta unsweetened iced green tea. The first 6 months he seemed just overly friendly, but that was it. I'm the type of barista that goes out of my way to make sure every customer feels happy when they leave, and so I'll have a short conversation with them if I can. And if it's too busy for me to stand in one place for long, then I'll at least smile at them and compliment something they're wearing, or say something along the lines of it being a nice day outside, and I hope they have a good one. I do that for every customer. I guess it came across as flirting or something similar to Greg. Last summer I walked in on my Sunday off to get a couple coffees for myself and my sister who was visiting, and he was walking in at the same time. I hadn't had any issues with him at this point, so I struck up a friendly conversation as we walked in, just politely asking if he's had a good day, the weather is nice for a walk, etc. When he suddenly asked if he could buy me a cup of coffee, I was a little surprised, but chalked it up to maybe him trying to show his thanks for me always making his drink. I politely declined and he didn't push it. I left with my coffee after he had gone outside with his tea, and I decided to reel back the friendly conversations with him a little, just in case. So I mostly just smiled at him when he came in, and had his drink out before he could finish paying, my attempt at getting him outside as quick as possible. He started to sit outside facing the window and staring at me though, which was a little odd, but I ignored it because other customers do that all the time, and even a coworker or two. Then one day he came in during a rush. I couldn't get to his drink until he was finished paying and waiting by the handoff plane, but I moved away from it to go make a refresher and his tea. As I was shaking the refresher in our tea shaker, he suddenly shouted at me that I should be a cocktail waitress. I laughed awkwardly and quickly brought his drink to him. Then I came in a week or so later and my boss pulled me aside. She informed me that Greg came in on my day off, so I wasn't there, and asked her where I specifically was. She shrugged and said she didn't know. A few months passed after that of my boss and co-workers doing everything they could to pull me from the front of the store to our back room, or make his drink and ring him up so we would cut the interactions to a minimal. I am the only person in the store he acts this way towards, so no one else is worried for themselves, it seems. That worked for a while. He stopped coming as often during cold months, since he always walked, and I relaxed. Then this summer hit, and he was showing up more often again. By this point we had almost a 100% turnover rate in my store, so mostly just the shifts and my boss knew about him. I walked in one day in June after spending the day with my best friend, and was running slightly behind but not late to my closing shift. I opened my car door and got out, only to see him walking from the store toward the road and my car. I cursed under my breath and tried to act like I wasn't getting out just yet, in the hopes that he hadn't seen me. No luck. He waited until I got out of the car before he said, "I thought I saw a cute redhead getting out of the car," and walking toward me. I smiled politely and told him I was running late so I couldn't chat, but have a nice day. I walked past toward my store and glanced back to see him looking at my license plate. I was immediately worried that he would somehow be able to use it to figure out where I live, or would follow me home one night, and I wouldn't know it's him since I've never seen him drive. A couple weeks passed and I ran into him and his wife in Kroger, a grocery store across the street from my store, as I was making a milk run for work. He smirked at me as he walked past me with his wife beside him, made a comment about how I was pretty. He stopped coming in a couple weeks after that, then walked up last week. I saw him in the parking lot and called my shift over the headset to please ring him up. My shift apologized and said he couldn't at the moment. He was literally on top of our ice machine, holding the top down while waiting for maintenance to show up to fix it. It had swung down and nearly knocked out my coworker. He asked my coworker, who was new, to ring him up instead, so I briefly explained the situation to her before making his drink, all before he could get inside. She agreed to ring him up, but he never came inside. He just sat down in our patio facing the window parallel to our bar, and stared at me for 3 or 4 minutes before getting up and leaving. I was thoroughly creeped out. 3 days ago now, I walked into work for a closing shift with my boss, and he was sitting on the patio as I walked up. I went a roundabout way toward the door so I would be as far from him as I could for as long as possible. When I reached the door, he shouted over to me and said, "Hey, gorgeous, late for work?" To which I smiled tightly and said, "No, I'm actually early," before I walked in and booked it to the back room. I immediately told my boss in shift, who had been there last week during the staring incident. My boss has had enough and wants to contact corporate to see if we can ban him or something for harassing me. The issue is I'm transferring to another location in 2 to 3 weeks, so I have no idea if they'll go through with it. Our district manager is notorious for siding with customers and refusing to ban anyone for any reason, including breaking the law and filming us, posting it on social media without our permission, and without blurring our faces when we ask them to stop recording us. What should I do? Should I go ahead and try to take this as far as I can with corporate? I don't want a future employee to possibly face the same treatment from him. Update. My manager talked to our district manager today, who then talked to me. She said she's having my manager get closer to him, to find out if he was aware of the comments and actions he made were inappropriate or not. 3. I had experienced something during the month of December in 2016 that has to this very day haunted and disturbed me. Before I explain this event, I have to give you some context that predates back to the years of 2014 and 2015. During the start of 2014, I was a 15-year-old teenager, newly enrolled in a small country high school, located within rural New South Wales, Australia. I had moved from Victoria, where I had previously been enrolled in a high school nearby the city. The boys in my new country school were accommodating, and being a male myself, I was invited to a couple of their parties during my first 6 months of being there. However, we simultaneously learned that we were not suited for each other. The boys that had welcomed me into their circle were very country-oriented, whereas I was more so cultured, city-oriented. We departed during mid-year on kind terms due to differences that just didn't gel. For the following month of June, my high school life was relatively lonesome. I had a few acquaintances, but I didn't really have any good friends that I hung out with consistently. This all changed, however, when a new girl named Jane enrolled in the school. This girl Jane was extremely different from the rest of the kids in the school. She had a crazy mohawk hairdo, wore various punk rings, and even a chain as a necklace. Most kids were weary and avoided her during this initial first month. However, I was oddly curious of her character. Deciding to approach her out of sheer curiosity, I decided to talk to her. It was morning time in class and I was seated next to her. She was a very quiet girl and did not really make eye contact with me. I decided to break the ice with her, and I complimented her on her rings. She laughed, cheered up immediately, and said, "Thanks, man." Fate was sealed. From my initial compliment, we very soon got along greatly like old-time friends. Within a couple of days, we became increasingly close, and I really enjoyed talking with her and just being in her presence. She looked like a complete punk, like a musician out of the 80s, much different to me. But we had similar interests in common. The closest thing we had in common was our love of horror films. We increasingly talked about different rare horrors that most people hadn't seen, and the like. I forget how it happened, but one day I went over to her house. Her family was extremely accommodating, and we had a great time. Now let me clarify. I had no attraction to her whatsoever. I actually thought she was a lesbian initially, for she acted and looked very butch for a 16-year-old girl. Following the years of 2014 through to mid-2016, we were extremely close. We would often visit each other's house at least once a week, and watch a film, game, etc. However, as I maintain, there was no attraction for me, and there was absolutely nothing sexual with regards to our friendship. The way I saw it was like two good pals hanging out. We got along so well. There were strange things about this girl, however. For one thing, by 2016, she got her body completely tattooed. And this was something I found quite odd, for she was only 17 by the time she was completely tattooed. Furthermore, her bedroom was rather disturbing. Inside, she had posters of serial killers, punk bands, and headless Barbie dolls hanging from her ceiling, covered in fake blood. I laughed it off and passed it off as something creative at the time. However, now looking back, it sheds light on her potentially very disturbing psychology. Anyway, on her 18th birthday in April of 2016, she made it very obvious that she liked me. In fact, in her very drunken state, she professed her love for me. I was very uncomfortable during the time, for I had absolutely no feelings for her in that way, and was not attracted to her either. For me, it was like a good guy pal telling me he loved me. I viewed Jane as very masculine. The following days, she never spoke of her profession again to me. I didn't speak about it either. We remained on strong terms, however, and still hung out with each other often. That was until around October of 2016. We were texting, and she texted something along the lines of, "Satan is badass," with which I texted back jokingly, "Nah, Satan is a jerk." Shortly after those texts, she never responded to me again. This girl had texted me usually every day of our friendship, so it was very strange that she ceased contact like that. I attempted to reach out to her, but she told me to just leave her alone. It was all very strange, and I was hurt by her abrupt ending of our long, strong friendship. 2 months passed, and near the start of December I embarked upon a holiday with my father to Bali. I was there for around 3 weeks, and had a good time too. When I got back home, the disturbing event occurred. I landed in Sydney to greet my mother. My mother had been staying at a house she owned in Sydney during my time in Bali, and was not at our country house in the countryside, where we had been residing during my high schooling. We drove back to the house late during the day, and winded up outside our country home very late at night. We both noticed something odd about the house. My bedroom light was on. We could see it due to the fact that my window was right out front of the house. My curtains were drawn, and we were both quite unnerved as we had turned off all of the lights when we left the house 3 weeks prior. I told my mother to stay in the car, and she did so. I proceeded to walk up to the door and let myself in. I walked right over to the kitchen and grabbed the large kitchen knife before opening my bedroom door. Upon opening my bedroom door, I noticed that my bedroom had been completely trashed. Nobody was in my room, thankfully. I walked back out and yelled over to Mum and said, "Mum, we've been robbed." Mum packed her things and walked into the house. We proceeded to turn on all of the lights in the house to see that nothing in the house had been touched. By this stage, I was extremely creeped out. My bedroom was the only room within the house that had been trashed and light left on. The rest of the house had not been touched, and was left with the lights turned off. As I investigated my room, something more peculiar struck me. Nothing had actually been stolen or broken. My bedsheets were taken off and thrown to the floor, my bed was flipped and my artwork upon the wall had been taken down. But nothing was actually broken or stolen. I had some expensive things in my room, including old artifacts and expensive pieces of jewelry that remained untouched. And that's when I noticed that upon my chest of drawers nearby my flipped bed, a Bible was left on the top. Somebody had placed a Bible upon my chest of drawers when they had been into my room. Regardless to say that to this very day we never found the culprit. However, from the very beginning of the discovery of my room, a word was in the back of my head. Jane. I talked with my mother and we reached the conclusion that it must have been Jane. You see, Jane had been to my house a series of times, and she knew that my bedroom window always remained unlocked, as we often got through that way when I had forgotten my key. There was no broken entry around the house, so the person that got in had to have gotten through my bedroom window. Following the next couple of days, the idea that Jane did it boiled in the back of my mind relentlessly. I kept thinking about her possible involvement, and could not help but text her about it. I sent her a text along the lines of, "Jane, please be honest with me. I am quite frankly unsettled at the moment, due to the fact that my bedroom was broken into just recently. Nothing was stolen or broken. Who would do this, and why? Please, Jane, if it was you, please let me know. I won't get you into trouble for it. I just need to know for closure. Thank you." She sent me back a text saying, "Somebody broke into your room? That sucks, man. I hope you're okay. But do you honestly think I would drive all the way to your house just to break into your room? Don't be a fucking idiot." I sent her another text saying, "I just don't know who else it could be." I never received another reply. The story gets stranger. I posted the entire ordeal regarding the trashing of my room upon Facebook, and it reached a lot of people. In the next couple of days, Jane's cousin Melody contacted me through Facebook. Her messages were very strange as she said, "Don't tell anybody about this, but I think Jane did it. She hasn't told me that she has, but I know it's something that she would do. She is a very disturbed and resentful person, and she was obviously hurt by the fact that you were not attracted to her in the same way that she was attracted to you. This is just my suspicion. Keep it between us." In the following months, I kept in contact with Melody. She herself is a nice person, and I was quite attracted to her too. By around February 2017, I asked her about Jane. Melody said, "Jane isn't well. She was kicked out of her parents' house and has been moved into a rehab in another state. She won't respond to my messages either." I never asked Melody about Jane again, for I have gotten over our once-had friendship, and I don't really care about her anymore. However, the fact that she was put into rehab sheds light upon her inner psychological state at the time. I still suspect to this very day that Jane was the one who broke into my room. Jane, if you're hearing this, I just want to ask you one thing. Why? And if it was not Jane, why would somebody go out of their way to approach a country house, get in through my window and trash my room? Wouldn't a stranger at least steal things? And why only my room? If it was a stranger. Anyway, Jane, let's not meet. Ever again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 341. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. This is going to sound really dumb. And I know it sounds dumb, but I'm going to say it anyway, because why not? Does anyone else feel really bad for the little toy llama in story number 1? I think it was number 1. I know it's dumb, but it just, it breaks my heart thinking the poor little fella just wanted to bring joy. But he never got played with again. I'm imagining in my mind now that when he was put into the garage sale all those years later, he finally found his purpose, found his bliss, and went to live with a new family who didn't know about the story of the creepy old man. Silly Hellfreezer. Okay, I'm gonna head off for now, so until next time, Thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.